And welcome into Poke the Bear, episode 107. I'm Evan Marinofsky. That is Conor Ryan. Conor, what is up?
Evan, I'm doing well. How you doing?
Doing great. Staying cool in these very hot times. And every year when it gets this hot out, typically that means there's not a ton to talk about with the Bruins. Again, no Bergeron signing, no Krejci. We're waiting on Pavel Zacha, which is coming out probably around August 11th when the arbitration hearing is scheduled for, unless they do something beforehand. So we're kind of in this waiting period where we're like, all right, like we've done enough of the, Nazem Kadri and when are Bergeron and Krejci going to sign? So why not freshen things up a bit? And you published your prospect rankings recently, 1 through 20. This is the go-to for prospect rankings. Nobody beats this.
No one beats it, Evan.
No one beats
People
this.
are saying, people in the streets.
The people are talking, and this is what they are saying. And it's quite interesting because the prospect, it's always fun to see prospect rankings because the average fan and a lot of us during the year when we're covering, the Bruins themselves, we don't get to see these guys all the time. So it's a lot of watching film and reading up on them and seeing how they're doing at specific points of the year. And you have come out with your prospect ranking. So what are your initial thoughts on, and how was it making this list?
It's definitely
a lot of Duncan.
Yes, a lot of Duncan, a lot of written through to make sure got everyone's name right and all that good stuff. But I always I think every year I enjoy doing it, and then you lay out the list. It's it's like what I always mention with Charlie Kelly, where he's got all the different names up and he's got a board. It's always good in practice of all right, it's prospect ranking time. Let's check in on the farm system, and then you put all the names out there, and you're like, shit. All right. Well, I know number 1 and 2 is pretty easy, and then after that, it all goes downhill very quickly. And in terms of where they sit, I kind of find it interesting. You saw that story come out recently. I think it was hockeyprospecting.com. I don't even know what the website was, but it ranked the Bruins having the worst farm system far and away, and everyone ran with it. I think it was on sports radio. Yeah, it was, but I don't know what the website was. It wasn't I would say established, but someone who I knew that all right, if they drop a full ranking or someone that's well known in scouting circles, they did an annual review. It was some other website that dropped and said they were the 32nd ranked farm system.
That'd be bad.
Yeah, that would be a bit of a red flag. But a lot of people ran with the fact that they were far and away the worst team in terms of a farm system. And I kind of pushed back on that a little bit. I think have they taken major strides? No, I still think it's a lot of maybe prospects that you can chart as having maybe a solid floor, or at least kind of what you're going to get if they work out at the NHL level, but not a lot of high-end talent. But I also think for as much as people talk about 2015, you can even look at 2018 and 2019 and be kind of discouraged with the overall returns from those draft classes. I think you look at 2020 and beyond, they've either hit on some guys or they've got a few guys in the system that at least should offer some optimism, right? I mean, you're looking at not just obviously there's the Lysell and Lohrei and those guys, but you look at a guy like Oscar Jelvik, who kind of came out of nowhere, and he's a guy that rose up my draft rankings. He was 6th overall this year for me. You look at, a guy like Ty Gallagher, who I had in my top 10, who was a 7th round pick. Talented guy, but he had obvious flaws in his game that maybe dropped him a bit. And he had a very strong year at BU. You look at other guys like Riley Duran, Ryan Mast. I think you look at in their system, at the very least, you have intriguing guys. Again, a lot can change over the span of a year. There were plenty of guys who I ranked in the top 20 last year who dropped out because, again, whether it's making the jump from maybe junior to the pros or the AHL to the NHL, all those things, these guys hit bumps in the road. So we'll see how maybe a few of these guys do going to Hockey East or jumping up outside of Canadian junior or anything like that. A guy over in Europe goes to North America, like Jelvik, right? He's been good, but we'll see how he is next year at BC. So I think you look at the system, I'd probably say it's in that 25-ish tier, which again, maybe isn't going to shock a lot. It's not going to get people excited, but I think there's at least more of an upward trajectory in terms of where these guys fit based on, I think, what you've seen out of these last 3 draft classes, where you at least have guys that I think if you're a Bruins fan, you should look forward to their development. There's not a lot of Lysells or Lohreis where you're like, these guys could be something special. But follow a guy like Jelvik, follow a guy like Georgi Merkulov, who's
I was just about to say Georgi Merkulov.
Yeah, there's guys out there that you should keep a close watch on, that if it pans out, they can at the very least be viable, productive, regular, everyday NHL players.
Yeah, I mean, you get to prospects whose stock rose the most. Feels like Merkulov was one of those guys. I mean, again, I know I wasn't on it last year because he was just signed out of college as a freshman. I think that was one of the really smart signings the Bruins made out of college, because I guarantee you, if he played a second year, his points would have jumped even more, because I think he had like 34 points in 31 games as a freshman at Ohio State. Imagine just as a sophomore. And again, that's just going to draw more interest from other NHL teams. So it felt like, to me, he was the prospect whose stock rose the most, just because he enters the list at number 3.
Right.
And again, we saw, at development camp, the offensive ability was everywhere. The defensive ability, maybe not so much.
Well, that's the thing is, like, I want to actually go down to Providence and actually watch a few of his games, because he has some stuff he has to work on in terms of maybe fine tuning the D zone part of his game. But the way everyone talked about it, like, what does this guy do? Like, what did he do during his first stint with Providence, and made everyone immediately be like, so Georgi Merkulov is pretty good. Yeah, but he's really going to work on his defense. Like, what was he doing out there? Was he doing pirouettes in the D zone? I'm very curious to see what it is. And he's a guy that also has said that he's, cognizant of that's something in his game that he needs to work on. So as long as the prospect himself is making a commitment to working on that part of his game, it's a step in the right direction. But yeah, I think he's definitely a guy that trot up the list quite a bit in terms of just, I think, the surprise of getting him. It's one of those things where a lot of these college free agents are usually upperclassmen or guys that are ready to make that jump. To have a guy like Merkulov, who kind of came out of nowhere, had a really strong freshman year at Ohio State, goes right to the pro game and had a solid, debut in short time last year with Providence. He's definitely a guy I think Bruins fans should keep a watch on, because he could be a guy that could pile on points in a hurry with a full season down in Providence.
He's just the kid Mites who doesn't play in the D zone. He's like a winger. He just stands at the red line waiting for his team to clear the puck out. Maybe he's doing that. You never know. Who was your prospect whose stock rose the most? I know you mentioned Jelvik. Is he your guy, or is there someone else that you look at and say, okay, his stock rose a ton?
I definitely think Jelvik's right up there. I think he's a guy that showed promising returns last year, and then this past season over in Sweden did a very good job. And he was probably, I think, right up there with a guy like Merkulov in terms of standing out quite a bit in dev camp. Again, we'll see how it is this upcoming season, making that jump to Hockey East, because I think that's going to be the first big hurdle for him to clear, because he was also playing very well in Sweden, but also was in, I think, the under 20 league. So wasn't playing against, it's not a guy like Matthias Mantikivi, who's playing 30-year-old dudes over in Finland. A guy like Jelvik is still kind of in his same age tier over in Sweden. So, but if he's a guy that has a freshman year at BC and he's giving you 20 points, then, you take that next step. It's almost like Lohrei last year, where it's like, all right, this guy ripped up the USHL, but he's also 20. So what happens? He goes to college. Oh, he's playing really well at Ohio State. All right. Then he takes that next step up in terms of his status. But Jelvik's a guy, I think one guy that I want to single out that I think made a huge jump is Ryan Mast.
Ooh, yes. Big dude. Yeah,
I had him at number 11 on my list. He was drafted in 2021. I think, was it 6th round? I want to say it was either 5th or 6th, I believe. So he was a little bit further down the list. But he was a guy that, as you said, big body. I think he's 6'6", a big physical defenseman. But in terms of finding value, it's kind of like we said with a guy like Gallagher. Ryan Mast pretty much didn't play all of his draft year because it got wiped out. I think he's up in Sarnia in the OHL. Didn't have a year because of COVID. So pretty much wasn't able to play. I think he did one 10-game showcase, I think in Erie, Pennsylvania. That was his only time scouts could watch him. So if you're
everybody was there. Everybody remembers the showcase.
Apparently, yes, the famous Erie, Pennsylvania showcase. But good on the Bruins for, I think, identifying a guy like that even though you don't have 60 plus games of junior hockey to watch, you kind of looked at his talent and saw something there. And I think you saw it this past season with Sarnia. Obviously, 6'6" defenseman, what kind of stands out? His size, physicality, of course, but I think he was also very productive offensively as well. I think he had about 30 points as a 6'6" defenseman. Now, again,
31 points in 59 games.
Yeah. Again, is that going to translate to the next level? Probably not. But at the very least, it shows that he's a guy that has the frame, a pro-ready body, but also has some poise with the puck as well. So even if he develops and becomes a guy that can give you, 10, 15 points while also being a 6'6" guy that's good in his own zone, there's value there, especially, again, for a fifth or sixth round pick as well. So he's a guy that I'm really looking forward to seeing maybe build off of this upcoming season in the OHL and kind of watching where he goes from there. Because, again, that's what you're seeing out of guys like him, Jelvik, Gallagher, all these guys. May not be high picks, and people talk about the fact Bruins haven't had a whole lot of first round picks, but at the very least, they're finding value and potential candidates further down in these last couple drafts.
And the other thing with Ryan Mast that's so interesting is, guess who's running player development?
Oh, I didn't think you were going to bring it up.
Adam McQuaid. I'll bring that up.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying they play the same game, obviously, but as a big right shot defenseman, that helps. That helps. I know it's easy to make that comparison, but I do think it helps.
He's growing the mullet, though.
Well, that's what he's got to do. He's got to grow out the mullet. But yeah, I mean, Mass is an interesting one. All those guys are interesting ones. So you were telling me before we came on air that there was a mob of people outside your house angry that you omitted some big prospects on this ranking. It's been tough on you.
Quite contentious, Evan. Let me just say, it's already. I was more bewildered because it's about 180 degrees out. So I'm like, why are you picking today? You sure
Bruins fans are dedicated. Bruins fans are dedicated.
It's true. It is true. I mean, it didn't look fun out there. I didn't even open the door. I saw them out there sweating. I'm like, all right, good luck, guys.
Not even giving you guys water.
No. I'm like, what are you doing out here? Like, seek shelter elsewhere. I'm not letting you in here. Were you yelling at me about prospects? No.
They had the fiery torches.
Yeah, exactly. Shoot. I don't know. I don't want to deal with it. It's already too hot.
See ya. What are you doing out here? Seriously, though, I mean, omissions wise, who was one of yours that you felt was tough to leave off or that will require some sort of explanation?
I think there's a few guys that maybe dipped a little bit. I think you look at a guy like Curtis Hall, who had a really strong collegiate career at Yale, missed his whole junior year, unfortunately, because of the COVID situation over there with those Ivy League teams. But then really kind of has struggled since making that adjustment up to the AHL level. I think he played in 52 games last year and had 5 points, which is not great.
Nope,
it's not exactly
terrific.
What you want. No. So we'll see how he fares next year. But I think the one guy that kind of stands out that I'm sure a lot of people had questions about was Jakub Lauko, who for years now is kind of, maybe it's a testament to the Bruins, farm system at the time, but any guy who has some skill, some flash to their game, I think automatically gets elevated, right? So he's a guy that said, he thought he was a first round talent. The Bruins were high on him, had some really good preseason games where he scored a few pretty goals and kind of got put on the radar there. Big Lord of the Rings fan, great kid to talk to. He has Gandalf tattoo. But yeah, this past year was kind of tough for him. And it's been kind of tough for him since making the jump over to Providence. A lot of it has to do with injuries. He's had a really rotten luck in a lot of regards. I mean, he had a really strong year in the Q, made the jump to the AHL. I think got injured like on his first shift at World Juniors with the Czech League. I think during his 1 year, he was eligible for it. So tough luck there. He's been banged up other seasons. And then this past year was probably his healthiest year overall. He played in 54 games, only had 16 points and was a minus 28, which is tough, right?
You don't need advanced stats. People don't need advanced stats to tell you that one's bad.
Yeah, and again, this is a Providence team that, under Mujanel, they were a very strong team last year, defensively sound. Like, I think it's one of those ones where I don't have the full plus minus, but I think it's like, all right, okay, what? Like, it's one of those where I don't exactly know what went on there. So it's one of those ones where you can either chalk it up to maybe it's just a lost season with other, factors at play, injuries, all that stuff. And maybe it's a clean slate and he can bounce back. But he's kind of a guy that I think is kind of stuck in a little bit of that limbo now in terms of, all right, it's expected for him to take the next step, but is he going to come or not? Because it's not like he's an up and coming young player now. He's 22 years old, right? Like, sooner or later, you have to decide, you have to make that next step in your career. So He's a guy that I think is an intriguing prospect because not only does he have some skill, I think you saw it a lot down in Providence. He's willing to kind of be the fly in the ointment, being an agitator, a guy that could bring value to this team if his scoring and his defensive game translated over. But you get to see him put it all together so far down in Providence. So I'm sure the Bruins will be hoping that he bounces back shortly this year.
You might not know this because it's not really public information, but Jakub Lauko's personal coach last year, Dave Lewis. Feels like it was with that plus minus. He was not actually. I made that sound way too serious than it was. David Lewis had nothing to do with Jakub.
There's someone just driving, being like, "What?"
I'm tweeting this right now.
They're gonna show up outside your house now, Evan.
Yeah,
they're migrating over. They're walking down over to Metro West.
They're walking down the Mass Pike for this. Jakub Lauko, to me, interesting omission given, like, you know, I mean, I remember in the 2018 development camp, he was like the guy, like the speed, and people were saying, I remember somehow he might have like made a joke or something about like him being like David Pastrnak or something. I forget exactly what the quote was, but something along those lines. I don't think he was saying like, oh yeah, I'm the next David Pastrnak, but it was like a joke like that. And people like didn't find it crazy because he was very fast and quite skilled. I'm not going to go with an omission. I'm going to go with a prediction for next year, for next year's top 20 prospect ranking, which I'm already highly anticipating, given the top 2 on this list. But I'm going to go ahead and say Bruins are going to sign Reese Gaber out of North Dakota after his junior year. And he's going to be somewhere in the top 6 of the rankings. I think he'll be somewhere in there because, you know, guys fall off or guys go to the NHL or whatever. I think he's going to get a spot in there because the Bruins are high on him. He loves the area. I think it's, you know, again, I think there's going to be a lot. I mean, Gaber is going to be a guy who's going to get a lot of points in his junior year at North Dakota. Like he's a guy to watch. And I think a lot of NHL teams are watching him. So I think he is going to be kind of like the Ben Myers of this upcoming college season. And again, the Bruins kind of have the upper hand, just given that they have a good relationship. He's been to development camp now. They got him out of North Dakota. You know, now he finally figured out what internet was, which must have been pretty cool for him.
I think he's from is he from like Saskatchewan or Manitoba or something like that? I feel like he's around that area, just a little bit up north.
Yeah, it's that part. That's part of his part of the country, or part of the continent. But I think that's my hot take. That's my prediction for next year. They sign Gaber, and he's somewhere in the top 6. So next year, when that happens, we will pull this audio.
Yes.
If it doesn't happen, we will wipe it. This will no longer exist. Of course. So an interesting question of this is Johnny Beecher's number 4. Merkulov's number 3. Merkulov's actually above Beecher. And it's funny because both players have wildly different skill sets. If only the Bruins could put them together.
Georgie Beecher. That sounds like a 50s like comic book like protagonist.
That sounds like a dude who
Georgie Beecher.
It sounds like a dude who tried out for the Three Stooges and got cut. Like he was supposed to be one of the 3 and he was the cut. 5th. Yes.
It was Curly Moe and Georgie Beecher.
Georgie Beecher. He was like the 6th version of Curly. But anyways,
also Johnny Merkulov sounds like it sounds like a Mortal Kombat character.
Yes, I was going to say he sounds like a superhero in a sense. Yes. Johnny Merkulov.
We're off the rails.
Yeah, we're going off the rails on this one.
It's August. It's fine.
It is. It doesn't matter at this point. The people are sitting. I mean, we're talking about barbecue on Bruins beat, so I think we can talk about anything at this point of the year. But it is a question with Beecher of, you know, can he realize his potential at the NHL level? Because he mentioned at Dev Camp he wants to work on his scoring. Now, I think everybody knows scoring is a very hard thing to work on because it's kind of inherent, right? It's in you or it's not. Some guys have it, some guys don't. You can work on your shot and you can work on like where you shoot, but you can either get to the dirty areas and score or not really. He's going to be in Providence this year for a full season, which I think is going to be really good for him. But can he realize that potential at the NHL level? And do you think we'll see him up in Boston this year at all?
Yeah, I think he could be in the running for it if he strings together some strong play down in Providence. And I think Beecher's still a guy that I'm pretty high on, but I'm also setting that ceiling, I think, where it should be. Like, is he, again, it's something that I wrote about a few days ago that, yes, he's a first round pick. He's got that label that comes with it. Is he going to be a top 6 center? Is he going to be a guy that you're going to put as a replacement for Bergeron or Krejci down the road? No, I don't think so. But just because that's the case doesn't mean that, one, he doesn't have a skill set that could translate to the NHL in another role, and two, that he doesn't have value on this team. Like, I think the guy that I look at what he does bring, and again, you need him to at least be somewhat productive. You can't have him be 60 games and have 2 goals and 3 assists, right? Like that's gonna be kind of tough. But I think you look at what he does have, whether it's his size, he's 6'3", already 210 pounds, his skating, which is great, which means he can be very effective on the forecheck. Obviously don't really track that much in college, but I think a lot of people saying that he's very, very good in transition, probably because he has those wheels. You look at that, you look at his two-way game, which has been refined as kind of what his role was this past year at Michigan. That's kind of their 3C. Like he does have value at the NHL if all works out. Like the guy that I always kind of compare him to is if he's almost like Sean Corrali with a bigger mean streak, right? Like and again, is that a first round pick? Probably not. Like also look at a guy like Curtis Lazar, who I think was a first round pick, higher up. I think the year he was drafted. Not a first round talent, but has value, right? Like if you have a guy like Beecher who hits his potential and has a strong year in Providence, and in a year or two, you can pencil him in as your 4C driving play for the next 5+ years. Like there's value in that in terms of not having to worry about one spot in the lineup that, yes, it's the fourth line, but looking at years past when the Bruins have had some deep playoff runs, you had guys like Corrali, Achari, Wagner. Look back to the Merlot line. Like there's value if you
Brent
have
Campbell.
you have value if you have guys in those spots that can bring a unique blend of hockey. And if Beecher can be a guy that can use that speed, that physicality that he has, and can also, again, not be a 20 goal scorer, I don't think that's to be expected. But if he can give you 20 points a season, I think he'll be more than happy with what he could bring, given what he already has established, I think, at the college level. And I think what you saw a little bit last year in Providence, that it's something that he kind of talked about when he spoke to us, that he thinks his game kind of translates more to the pros with the more physicality. I don't think he's getting suspended for some of his hits like he did in Michigan, right? Like off some of his willingness to initiate contact. So again, first round pick, probably not, but doesn't mean I think you should just discard him in terms of what he could bring to this team in a pretty short order too. Like he could very well be up with the NHL club in a few months if all works well.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's funny to watch him and to watch him at Dev Camp. I mean, he just looks kind of more advanced than a lot of them, just given his two-way game and his size. He's been there a lot, so I do think it's possible that he's up in the bottom 6 at some point this year. And again, with him, you're getting a solid bottom 6 game, right? Like, that you can pencil him in as the fourth line center, or in, some cases, maybe the third line center. I can tell you this. I watched so much Michigan last year, more Michigan than than anyone should watch in a single season. Dude had so many shorthanded breakaways. Like, it was absurd at some level, just the amount of shorthanded breakaways that he had. And again, they relied on him for that. And I always thought, hey, he could easily go somewhere else. We always kind of said, he should go to a BC or a BU, Northeastern, somewhere around here, play in the top 6, get power play minutes, and kind of build that way. He liked Michigan, wanted to win a national championship, didn't, unfortunately for him this past year, but, went to Providence after this past season. Probably jumped ship from Michigan at the correct time.
Yes.
Seems like he left at the perfect time.
Yikes.
That whole situation, by the way, is brutal. That is not good. No, not good. Very bad. A lot of good reporting going on, though, around that, I will say. But unfortunate to have to report those things because it's not looking so
not great. Not great.
But Beecher's going to be an interesting one this year. And I think, what's funny, and you mentioned it a lot, like, I do think fans are going to have such high hopes for him that even if he is a stable third line center or fourth line center, people are going to be like, oh, what a bust. And it's like, no, like this, even when he was drafted, this was the MO on him. Like this has not changed. So again, if he can come in and be a stable fourth line center, Sweeney says he wants to play the kids in those situations. Maybe Beecher's that kid,
Listen, all Johnny Beecher needs to do in his first game with the Bruins, he only needs to do one thing and he'll be all set. Just got to fight someone. You got to fight someone, or you got to absolutely deck an established player, or a clean but very heavy hit, and you'll be all set. It gives you at least 2 years of leeway.
Oh, that's the way.
He could blow a tire in the D zone and give up a goal, and we'd be like, oh. But like, remember that sick hit he dropped on? Like, you're all set. So Johnny Beecher, if you're listening, I don't know why you are.
Yeah,
don't. Do that. Yeah,
just fight someone. Just fight someone. Anybody. Just beat them up. Try your best at it. So the big question on this is the 1 and 2, because as you said, the number 1 and 2 for you shouldn't surprise anybody. Fabian Lysell and Mason Lohrei, the 2 top prospects. Which, by the way, I will say, little surprise coming on Bruins Beat this Monday, unless big news breaks, which in that case, you and I will have to do an episode. I got Mason Lohrei for like 35 minutes. So it's a nice, fun interview on his life and childhood and what got him here, and interesting stuff. I didn't know how interesting it was going to be. Because again, I had looked over his stuff. I was like, oh, this should be like pretty cool. And it was like very cool. So I think you guys will very much enjoy the interview. So that was my little plug there for this, so preview.
Very good.
But who has the higher ceiling, Fabian Lysell or Mason Lohrei? Because again, 2 different positions. It's hard to tell.
I mean, both very talented guys. I'll probably give the slight edge to Lohrei in terms of, I think when you look at how many guys are in the league that can, replicate what he brings when he's on his game. Not a whole lot of guys that have that size and that playmaking ability, that I think if you pencil him into a top 4 of an NHL D core, again, not a lot of comparables there. There's a lot of offensive-minded defensemen, but you look at a guy like Makai, who's not the biggest guy, or Adam Fox or anyone like that. Lohrei at, what is he, 6'4" now?
6'4".
6'4". Very few guys knew that. Like, who's John Carlson, right? That's the only guy I can think of that really is John Carlson's 6'3" and is obviously a very gifted guy in the offensive zone. So if Lohrei can be a guy like that, again, I think it kind of sets him apart from even a guy like Lysell, who I really don't know who exactly the comparison for Lysell is. And it's one of those things too, where I just want to see how he does this upcoming year, wherever he ends up, right? Because if he's down in Providence and he's a point per game guy down there, then it's like, all right, this guy could be something special. But I think, as something we talked about before with Lysell, is kind of just keeping those expectations in check, because these guys sooner or later hit some bumps in the road. But I think he has the ceiling of a legit impact top 6 winger. But I think when you look at just their different skill sets and which one really brings more value, you do have a guy like Lohrei who you can pencil in of giving you 20 minutes a night, give you 40 plus points and be a solid guy, can run your power play, all those things. That's a great coup for a guy that when he got drafted, I think everyone was just scrolling through like Twitter being like, who is this? Who's this man? We don't know anything about this guy. So I'll give the edge to Lohrei, but that's not, speaking ill of Lysell and what he brings. I think you saw, especially how he ended last year in the WHL, very, very talented prospect.
See, the thing with Lohrei is he doesn't have to be the number 1 left shot defenseman anymore. I remember when before the Bruins got Hampus Lindholm, it was they need a top 4, they need a number 1 left shot defenseman. And everybody kind of went like, well, it's coming in Mason Lohrei. Now he can be the number 2 if when he comes up. The expectations, the load is not as heavy as it might have been just, a year ago. I'm going to go with Lysell. I think a top 6 winger who you can pencil in for, and again, I'm not saying this is his first year, second year, but there are high expectations. If he can give you 70 points a year or somewhere around there, which he easily could with his skill set, the way he gets to the net, his speed, his shiftiness, the ability to win one-on-one battles, that's pretty valuable. That's really valuable. And obviously you've got David Pastrnak there. You have Brad Marchand, you have Taylor Hall. If he can suddenly be kind of the 4th winger of the top 6, that's pretty good. And suddenly you've got, you have the ability to mix and match on the wings. And again, that's not to discount Jake DeBrusk, but it's hard to imagine Jake DeBrusk lasting long-term in the top 6, unless he makes giant strides in his game this year, which he easily could. But again, I think a guy like Lysell with the point, with that skill set, you have to think sky's the limit there. Everybody temper expectations for this year. It's hard to do that again, especially when he got drafted. Everybody's like, well, that's the next David Pastrnak. And it's like, no, it's a little different. What's interesting is that maybe this is just my eyes, but there are times in transition when Lysell kind of looks like Phil Kessel in a good way. I mean, this in a good way, the way, his shot release and things like that. I could be wrong. People are going to pick that apart and be like, Evan's an idiot. He doesn't know what he's watching. But there are times I see it. And guess what? That's not a bad thing.
That's a very good thing. I think another comparison, I think I heard a lot about Lysell. I think especially early on he was drafted was Nikolai Ehlers, who rocks. I think I love Nikolai Ehlers. So if they get a guy like him, who is one of the more underrated players, I think, of the NHL, I think he'll be pretty happy. He's really good.
The good problem is both have very high ceilings and both
exactly
to hit it. I think it's more realistic that Lohrei hits his ceiling. I think it's just he's a defenseman. It's a little, I mean, I know it's harder to adjust as a defenseman, but I don't know. I just feel like with his size, it's there. Whereas Lysell's had some issues with consistency in the past. So again, Lysell could maybe be more impactful, but it's also a better chance that he isn't as impactful.
Yeah, it's I think the floor is easier to map out for Lohrei. Where like I think Lohrei could be, I think he will be an everyday guy, but is he like a third pairing quarterback of a power play, but like sheltered 5-on-5 minutes, or is he an like all situation top 4 guy? I think that's kind of the variance with him. Lysell, you still have to see how he does in Providence, all those things, but the potential is, as you said, it's right there. Watch any of his film. Yeah.
So I mean, again, both are very good. And I mean, both put the Bruins above the other bad prospect teams.
We're not 36th anymore, Evan.
36th to 32nd, maybe we'll say. But it's gonna be interesting to watch this year. And the other thing is a lot of these guys are in Boston or in the area, right? You have Providence, the Providence Bruins. You got Beecher and Merkulov and the rest of the team. Then you got BU with Ty Gallagher. You got BC with Jelvik and Trevor Kuntar. I must be forgetting someone. You have Mason Langenbrunner at Harvard. You got Riley Duran down in with the Providence Friars.
With Phillips Fedebeck.
Yeah,
he's going to Providence.
Forgot about him. Oh, you have Brandon Busey with the Providence Bruins as well. Yep. So there's a lot of guys in the area that if you're, the Bruins don't usually play on Friday nights. College hockey does. It's in the area. Go to a game. It's right there. It's cheap. It's fun. By the way, I don't work for the NCAA anymore, so I'm not saying this because I have to.
Corporate stooge.
Corporate stiff. Evan Marinofsky, corporate stiff, certified corporate stiff. But it's fun, and the games are fun, and it's a little cheaper, and it's fun. It's fun to watch the future. You get to say you watched, a future superstar in the making.
I watched Mason Lohrei when he was at. Okay, Grandpa, let's get you to bed. Yeah.
Let's get you right in there. Yeah, you have no idea what you're talking about. I used to watch Joe Rogan when he was the host of Fear Factor.
Well, okay.
Go to bed.
Go to bed.
No way. Anyways, Conor, what can people look forward to from you over at Boston Sports Journal?
Yeah, I think as we still await, Evan, some more tangible news, we'll still keep on cranking out off-season storylines in terms of guys who are already on the roster. We're doing something on Jakub Zboril and where he fits in. I think you look at a guy like Jake DeBrusk, for as much as this roster has, you're still waiting for the other shoe to drop with guys like Bergeron and Krejci. There's so many guys that are established on this roster or younger players that are trying to carve out everyday roles that there's still a lot of questions that need to be answered in that regard. So we'll be examining all those different kind of players over the next couple of weeks over at bostonsportsjournal.com. So please subscribe over at BSJ. Want to follow me on Twitter? You can do that at ConorRyan_93.
Go do all that. Remember to subscribe to Bruins Rinkside on YouTube. That's Conor Ryan. I'm Evan Marinofsky. Both the listeners. Have a great rest of your week.